The final book on my 2024 reading list. I saved this one on purpose to be my last book on this reading list because of a variety of reasons. One is I just retired after 31 years from the United States Marine Corps, so I'm transitioning on into a new life. I wanted to read about the ultimate individual, a little bit about the challenges they embraced as they took on a transition of their own. By no means am I comparing mine to George Washington's, but there's a little bit of unknown history about George Washington as he left the presidency and moved on in his final years as a private citizen. As I read it, I instantly knew this is going to be on my reading list because it is exceptional. Washington's End by Jonathan Horn covers the final 2 years specifically of George Washington's life. It covers the period from 1797 to 1799, a little bit of unknown history and the things and the challenges that he went through, leaving the presidency and then moving on as a private citizen, and many of the things that he went through. So here's a quick breakdown of the book, and then I'm going to dive into some more specifics to summarize them for you. 1797, as we know, his second term as president ends, and even though some wanted him to continue on, in many ways he set the standard for how other presidents are going to run, as he only wanted to do 2 terms instead of being somewhat of a king like many people were used to. So he returns to Mount Vernon, his residence in Virginia, and he lives out his final years. However, in 1798, just when he thinks he was able to break free, they bring him right back, and he is reluctantly persuaded to serve as the commanding general of the United States Army due to the possibility, the potential of conflict with France, and how he was very reluctant to do that, but he did that because he put his country before himself. And then his last year in 1799, where Washington dies at Mount Vernon on the 14th of December at the age of 67 years old. While the focus is on George Washington's final years, it also delves into some of the prior decisions he made, some of the earlier experiences that he went through, and those decisions that provide context for this book and for Washington's perspective on decisions that he made later in life and his post-presidential life as well. And I think that context is really important. It's something that I always talk about, the importance of context, so that we understand the why behind the decision. And so I really like how that book brought up his earlier years and some of the life experiences he went through and some of the things that he dealt with in battle and different wars, which allowed him to create that knowledge and experience and wisdom to make decisions later on in life. And so I really love that part of the book. So Washington's End, as we know, talks about his final 2 years specifically. And while many may think he finished up as our first president, he's going to go out onto a bed of roses and just live a beautiful and perfect life, the book really touches on the nuances of post-presidential life and the challenges he went through. And while today we may think of politics as muddy and messy, you would be amazed, or at least I was, at all of the criticism and the challenges that George Washington faced as he left office. And in many ways, what we're experiencing today, although different and sometimes a little meaner and mean-spirited and certainly more partisan, it's not new. And it happened then as well. They just didn't have some of the social media tools, the internet, and the 24/7 news as well. I loved that they touched on those nuances because it gave me perspective into today's affairs. Some of the key themes of this book, the first one being the disillusionment and the criticism that George Washington faced. He grappled with public criticism and partisan divisions that emerged during his presidency and how that evolved during his post-presidential life. He felt disillusioned with the political landscape and worried about the nation's future unity. Sounds very familiar, right? So he was worried how people in his eyes were choosing partisanship over the country, choosing a party instead of the flag first and the nation first. And that was his perspective on things. George Washington, although there are statues and universities and books and everything written about him, we may think, wow, what a perfect individual this guy was, but he was a person as well. And one of the things I really loved about this book is it touches on some of the hidden struggles that he had, specifically financial. He had some financial struggles and some challenges there that concerned him. He wasn't able to leave public office or to leave as a 4-star general and then take big board seat or something that pays him millions and millions of dollars that we often see today. He returned and really showed the way as a private citizen and didn't ultimately capitalize too much on being a president and a leader of our nation. And because of that, he suffered financially. And I had not read about that before, so that was fascinating to know. The book also touches on the theme of his legacy and identity and how he struggled with that post-presidential presidential life, navigating the complex task of crafting his legacy while simultaneously trying to return to private life. And that was a struggle. And I understand that, certainly not to his level, not even close to his level, but wanting to move past being a Marine, being a master gunnery sergeant, knowing that I will always be a Marine, but wanting to move on. And I understand the struggles he went through, again, not to his level, but looking forward instead of back. And it really resonated with me, the things that President George Washington went through in his post-presidential life. He really struggled to define what is a post-presidential role. What is he supposed to do? He thought maybe he needs to step back a little and let the next president lead, but the nation really yearned for him. They wanted to hear his voice. The majority of the nation did, at least. He struggled with how did he balance out just being a husband and just a private citizen. I think many of those themes that are touched on in this book, we all may struggle with as well. Maybe you're getting a new job, maybe you retired from the military, or starting an entirely different line of work, and you're trying to move forward, but the past continues to bring you back. And I think reading this and learning through his lessons are very helpful. The other theme is one of unfinished business. And although he had left as the president of the United States and tried to move on, as they say in the military, the enemy gets a vote. And because there were struggles going on and potential conflict with France, one of the things was he was drawn right back into military service. He did that reluctantly, but because of the national security challenges that were going on in the United States at the time, he knew that he needed to serve his country. So although reluctantly, he did move forward as the commanding general of the Army. A bit of some of the intriguing aspects of this book as well that I thought were fascinating that I didn't know about. One of them was his leadership perspective and how he led, the differences of leading as a president and a private citizen. The book examines how Washington's personality and leadership style, which served him well as president, may not have been necessarily what the nation needed and hindered his ability to adjust to private life. And I think anyone who has served in any capacity, whether they did 4 years as a firefighter, 31 years as a Marine like myself, you get kind of institutionalized to a certain way. And then you have to adjust to private life. And I know I'm struggling with it. I'll get there. I'll figure it out. But it was really interesting to see that our founding father, George Washington himself, struggled with this. And it is a challenge. You have to adjust. You can't expect the world to adjust to you. We have to adjust to the world. And so that was an interesting perspective to see that George Washington also dealt with this dynamic. Washington's end also touched on another theme that most of us will never have to deal with, but I think it's important to mention here: the complex relationship between public expectations and his own personal desires, showcasing how even national heroes face personal struggles and anxieties. I can't imagine being in a new country, just getting this nation settled, and he's the first leader of the country. We just went through a lot of conflict. Many of our countrymen and women, our brothers and sisters, are dead. We're moving on. We're about to approach the 1800s, and he's trying to return to private life, but everyone knows who he is, and they're trying to bring him back while he's trying to balance out being a private citizen and stay private. It's really hard, and he touches on the nuances there. It's just fascinating. It's got to be an unbelievable struggle. I imagine folks like Michael Jordan or Tom Cruise or any of the major celebrities that are out there that want to be private from time to time. That's a struggle. It's a different one, of course, but it's still a struggle and a challenge, and I think we have to try to find a way to respect their privacy. And George Washington, in this book, it's talked about. What I love about this book is it really challenges the kind of one-dimensional perspective and ideas we have about George Washington, this glorious leader, this battlefield commander, but he's far more than that. He's an individual who has lost different battles, who has had different conflicts, his own health challenges, and a variety of different things as well, because guess what? He is a human, and we all make mistakes. None of us are perfect, and this book really does a great job of touching on this. It provides valuable insights into the challenges of leadership, legacy building, and navigating the often turbulent waters of public life. The final 2 years of George Washington's life, very few know about because it kind of ends there. He's the president of the United States. So let's talk about some of the health challenges and some of the issues that George Washington battled in private. In December 1799, at Mount Vernon, Washington began experiencing a sore throat and difficulty breathing. Medicine back then wasn't what it is today, so they struggled to figure out what to do. One of the things they did back then was called bloodletting, which is literally they would cut it, common practice then, and let it kind of bleed out. But as professionals today think through that, many of them will tell you that probably made him weaker and exacerbated the issue, maybe even led to a slightly earlier death. Who knows? Hard to say. Despite treatment by several doctors, his condition worsened rapidly once he identified having that sore throat. Although the exact cause of this is disputed, the book mentioned possibilities like quinsy, which is a sore throat infection. The bottom line is he had some challenges with his throat, and that ultimately led to his passing at the age of 67. In his final days, though, Washington remained composed woes. He remained alert despite the pain and discomfort. He dictated his final instructions and arranged his affairs, and so he was able to plan his passing and be prepared for that. And then ultimately on the 14th of December, 1799, George Washington, our founding father of the United States of America, passed at the age of 67. The impact of George Washington, I couldn't find an adjective to describe it. Obviously, it was powerful. He was a tremendous leader, the leader we needed at that time. His impact, his legacy will live on forever. His death was certainly mourned throughout the nation, sparking widespread grief, a lot of tributes paid to him, and a lot of the conversation about the next president and how he quite didn't measure up at the time. And certainly it was going to be impossible for anyone to measure up to George Washington. It marked the end of an era and solidified his status as a founding father and national hero. As I thought more and more about George Washington's legacy in this incredible book, I found it fascinating the fact that our founding father did not sign the Declaration of Independence for obvious reasons, but also more about George Washington himself. So he did not have any biological children, but him and his wife Martha, who he married in 1759, she had 2 prior children before their marriage, and he in many ways loved them, raised them as his own. But he also had a number of both half-siblings and brothers and sisters. So his half-siblings, Lawrence, Augustine, and Jane, who he loved very much, and then his full siblings, Elizabeth, who was known as Betty. She was the oldest of the siblings. She ended up marrying and having 11 children and remained close to George throughout his life. So Betty certainly was someone confidant and a special individual in George Washington's life. His younger brother, Samuel, known for being adventurous and having his own financial struggles as well. What an interesting individual that Samuel was. Married 5 times, had several children. I wasn't even able to find any documentation to say how many exactly, but he was certainly in and out of different marriages for a variety of different reasons, not judgmental here, but a little bit in that way different from George himself. His other younger brother, John Augustine, briefly served in the military and managed some of George's properties. However, he didn't live a long life, so he died before George. And then his very youngest brother, Charles, held a variety of different political positions similar to George, obviously not reaching the pinnacle there, and maintained a close correspondence with George throughout their lives. So ladies and gentlemen, I would offer to you that if you are getting ready to do any major changes in your life, to transition, to take on something new and different like I did, as I retired after 31 years, United States Marine Corps, I could find no better book, no greater person to take lessons from than a founding father, President George Washington, as he transitioned in 1797, left the position of presidency, moved on his own private life, and learning the lessons of how he dealt with that transition. Because I would imagine, at least for me, and probably for you as well, we haven't reached quite the level of a President Washington. Whatever he went through, ours will be at a lesser scale. There are many people we talk about in history that we'd like to meet. Certainly for me, George Washington would be one of them. Serving as the first president of the United States from 1789 to 1797, establishing key precedents and setting the tone for future leaders. My hope is that our individuals running for office, whether it's as the president, whether it's for Congress, for governor, local leadership, will spend some time reflecting on George Washington, on many of our founding fathers and their mindset and their ideals, because it was always for them the flag and the country first. Even though we had our major challenges and issues, I don't necessarily see that same mentality and mindset today where our country comes before party, where patriotism comes before profit. For me, there's no better book and no better way that I could end my 2024 reading list than by putting this book on there and talking about our founding father, George Washington. All right, everyone, thank you again for following me, for watching this series as I've put together on my 2024 reading list. Now the work begins. Now I got to continue reading and gathering my thoughts as I think about next year in the 2025 reading list. Why don't you do me a favor? Share with me in the comment section books you think I should be reading. Share with me in the comment section thoughts you have on this book, other topics that I should cover in personal development as well. I really appreciate you being along with me on this journey, and I realize this page is not what it's going to be. We're going to continue to learn, to get better, to improve. But for those of you that have followed me from the beginning and early on, I really appreciate it, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well, okay? Thank you very much.